I had always lived under the assumption that my grandfather had passed away 2 decades prior, a narrative my father had carefully constructed. There was no burial, no headstone, just an unsettling silence. As a struggling single mother, constantly battling financial hardship, I couldn't afford the luxury of questioning this until my daughter and I found ourselves without a roof over our heads, hungry and despondent beneath a cold bridge. It was on that grim night that a luxurious black vehicle pulled up across the street. My initial thought was the police, or something more ominous. However, as the window descended, I recognized a face I had only glimpsed in a single faded photograph. My grandfather. He was not dead. He was very much alive, and not merely alive, but a billionaire. He surveyed my daughter and me, then, with an understated tone, instructed, "Get in the car." We were transported directly to a manor of such grandeur, it surpassed anything I could have imagined. I was torn between tears and the urge to flee. A torrent of questions assailed me. Why now? Where had he been all these years? It was then that he unveiled the truth concerning my father. His revelations shattered every preconceived notion I held about my family, my past, and the circumstances that had led me to the streets with my child to safeguard. If you anticipate a simple tale of reconciliation, prepare to be surprised. This is an account steeped in betrayal, long-held secrets, usurped legacies, and a final opportunity to rectify profound injustices. Stay with me, you'll undoubtedly want to uncover what transpired next. Emma Reed, at 32, had been an unassuming yet aspiring office assistant at a modest financial institution in Manhattan. Her life had always skirted the edge of commonality, college-educated, a single parent, determined to overcome obstacles without relying on the former privileges of her family. She never envisioned such a precipitous downfall, not to this extent. Now, in the winter of 2023, the wind howled through the steel framework of the Brooklyn Bridge as cold, slanted sheets of rain descended. Beneath the concrete buttress, Emma huddled within a makeshift shelter of damp cardboard and frayed blankets. Her arms were wrapped tightly around a small bundle beside her, her 6-year-old daughter, Lily. Above them, the city marched on, tires sloshing through puddles, distant horns blaring, sirens piercing the air. But below the bridge, time had dissolved into an eerie stillness, the kind of silence that engulfs you when all avenues have been exhausted. Emma drew Lily closer, tucking the edge of a worn coat over the child's shivering shoulders. "Would you like a story before bed, sweetie?" she whispered, striving to prevent her voice from trembling. Lily nodded feebly, her eyes wide with exhaustion. "One about Grandpa?" Emma managed a strained smile. "The brave one, remember? The one who built grand structures and helped people." Lily's face brightened subtly. "He's not here anymore, right?" Emma paused. "No, darling. He passed away a long time ago. But he was a remarkable man. Intelligent, kind, someone you would have adored." The untruth tasted bitter in her mouth. She didn't possess the full narrative, only what she'd been told and what she'd come to accept. That her grandfather had died 2 decades ago, in an obscure, unexplained manner, buried alongside the last vestiges of the Reed family's integrity. She continued the story, her voice low and soothing, depicting soaring skyscrapers and a man who steadfastly pursued what mattered. A fairy tale, in essence, as no one had appeared to rescue her. Not her father, not anyone. Lily interrupted, gazing up at her, blinking. "Mum, why don't we have a house?" Emma swallowed hard, her eyes burning. "Because sometimes life guides us through difficult periods before we discover the good ones. But we're together. That's what truly counts, isn't it?" Lily nodded again and eventually drifted off against her shoulder, her breathing soft and steady. Emma remained awake long afterward, watching water seep through the cracks in the concrete above. She reflected on all she had lost: her job during the recession, her apartment when rent became unmanageable, the friends who ceased returning her calls. Yet, nothing compared to the chilling silence emanating from her father, Charles Reed, a man of immense wealth, influence, and every capacity to assist, who had stared her in the eye and declared, "You are no longer my daughter." That night she had pleaded for herself. For Lily, all he offered was a final slamming door. And now she found herself here, huddled beneath a bridge, clinging to her child like a lifeline, questioning if rock bottom had a deeper level, until headlights pierced the fog. Emma blinked, shielding her eyes. The silhouette of a sleek black Rolls-Royce materialized, moving slowly and deliberately towards their spot under the bridge. She tensed. No one ever ventured there unless their intentions were malicious, or they were lost. The car stopped. The engine fell silent. She instinctively wrapped herself around Lily, her heart pounding. The rear door opened, and from the shadows emerged a tall man in a long wool coat. He stepped out with a composed demeanor, suggesting familiarity with authority. Yet something in his posture, rigid and purposeful, also hinted at a personal burden. He approached, pausing in the drizzle. "Emma Reed." Emma's body stiffened. His voice was deeper than she remembered, aged yet undeniably his. Her breath caught in her throat as the man stepped fully into the light. Wrinkles deeply etched his face, and his formerly dark hair had turned silver, but his eyes, those sharp, steely grey eyes, were unchanged. "Grandpa," she whispered. "It couldn't be. It shouldn't be. Walter Reed had died. Her father had stated it. Publications had corroborated it. There had been no funeral, no closure, just an absence. And yet, there he stood, before her in the torrential rain, resembling a ghost made flesh, with a luxury car idling behind him, and the atmosphere around him thick with everything she no longer possessed." He didn't smile. He didn't speak immediately. He simply observed her, then Lily, and then back to her. In that moment, Emma no longer felt the cold. She didn't feel hunger or anger or brokenness. She felt only confusion, raw and hollowed out by years of believing no one from her family would ever come for her. Walter spoke again, more gently this time. "You've endured enough." Emma was unable to respond. She could barely breathe. The only thought that consumed her was a question that had been buried for years, now surging to the surface with a volatile mix of hope and rage. How? How was he alive? And why, after 20 years of silence, was he standing before her now? That answer would irrevocably alter everything. Emma had no recollection of walking towards the car. Her legs moved as if an unseen force controlled them. Rain still clung to her coat, but she no longer registered it. Her gaze was fixed on the man, his eyes steady on hers. Eyes she hadn't seen since childhood, peering from an old photo in a dusty hallway. Walter Reed, her grandfather, a ghost returned to life. He extended a hand, not with urgency, but with a surprising tenderness, as if a sudden movement might startle her away. Emma hesitated for only a second before placing her trembling fingers into his. The warmth of his grip was unequivocally real, as was the silent plea in his expression. "Come with me!" The car's interior exuded the scent of leather and a faint cologne. Lily stirred beside her, sleepily rubbing her eyes. Walter sat opposite them, observing the small girl with a peculiar blend of reverence and sorrow, as though each breath she took brought him both serenity and pain. "I want to help," he uttered quietly. "If you allow me." Emma remained silent, holding Lily closer, the child's tiny body nestled under her chin. A cascade of questions raced through her mind, none with comfortable answers. The journey to Manhattan felt both interminable and instantaneous. The city glowed as it always did, indifferent, formidable, and distinct. But the neighborhood they entered was another world entirely. Pristine sidewalks, secure gates, meticulously trimmed hedges and limestone facades. When the car paused before a tall, stately townhouse, nestled amidst embassies and luxury condominiums. Emma froze. "You live here?" she inquired, her voice parched. Walter nodded. "For the time being." Inside, warmth permeated the halls like a living entity. An assistant relieved them of their coats. Another brought hot tea. Lily clung to her hand, wide-eyed as they passed oil paintings and high ceilings into a drawing room that seemed lifted from a different era. Emma sat down gingerly, as if she might damage the furnishings. Walter remained standing, observing her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Finally, she found her voice. "They said you were dead." He did not respond immediately. Instead, he moved to the fireplace, retrieved a framed photograph and handed it to her. It was an old company portrait, Reed Enterprises. Her father, Charles, stood proudly in the centre, with Walter beside him. Behind them, the golden logo gleamed. "I wasn't dead," he began, "but I might as well have been." She looked up sharply. "What happened?" Walter finally sat opposite her, his hands clasped, his eyes cast down for the first time. "Your father." He was angry, resentful, always convinced I favoured his younger brother. After the funeral, he changed. Emma didn't interrupt. "I trusted him," Walter continued. "He brought me documents to sign, claiming they were routine. I didn't scrutinise them. I had been fatigued, worn out, a mistake I had never made before. I signed away the company." Emma's jaw tightened. Then the rumours started. A boating accident, a disappearance. Within months, the board declared me dead. Legally, I was erased from every record. He didn't just take the company, he eradicated me. Emma stared at him, stunned. "So, what did you do?" He smiled faintly. "I started over, quietly, utilising the contacts I still possessed. I transitioned into tech, assembled a team, founded Sunbridge Holdings. Small at first, then large enough to rival what I had lost. But I kept my identity concealed. I didn't want him coming after me again." Emma absorbed this slowly. Walter Reed, the man who once spearheaded one of New York's oldest financial empires, had been living in plain sight for 20 years, meticulously rebuilding what his own son had stolen. "And me?" she asked. "Did you ever think of me?" His expression softened. The firelight danced across his features, unveiling a raw emotion, deeper than mere regret. "Guilt," he confessed softly. "I did. I never stopped thinking of you, not for a single day." Her throat tightened with a knot of emotion. "Then why didn't you find me when I was homeless? When I lost my job? When Lily fell ill and I had nowhere else to go?" Walter met her gaze without flinching. "I received your letter." The admission stunned her. He nodded slowly. "It arrived at an old address, one I still checked occasionally. When I read it, I knew you were in distress. I longed to reach out." But his voice cracked for the first time. "I was afraid that if Charles and Diana discovered my whereabouts, they would dismantle everything I had painstakingly rebuilt. They nearly destroyed me once before, and then I wasn't strong. I was sick, consumed by grief, and more angry at myself than anyone else." Emma's voice quivered with indignation. "So, you simply allowed us to suffer?" "No," he stated firmly. "I detested myself for it. I followed your movements. I dispatched someone to check on you, but by the time they arrived, you had already moved on. You were always a step ahead. Or perhaps I was always a step too late." Lily had drifted off to sleep on the sofa, curled up like a small kitten among the cushions. Walter glanced at her, and when his eyes met Emma's again, they were moist. "She resembles you," he observed. Emma averted her gaze. "I cannot reclaim the time we have lost," he continued, "but I can be present now, if you will allow me." She didn't respond immediately. Her heart was a tempest of conflicting emotions, rage, pain, relief, and uncertainty. Yet, in that silence, she discerned something else in Walter's expression. Fear. Not fear of Charles, nor of being discovered, but fear of rejection, of having arrived too late, and that, in a strange way, made him human again. She barely nodded, whispering, "We'll stay tonight." Walter exhaled slowly, a long, drawn-out breath. "That's all I ask." In the quiet that followed, Emma leaned her head back, listening to the gentle drumming of rain against the windows of a world she felt alien to, but one she might, just might, learn to embrace. Walter remained awake that night, as did Emma. While Lily slept soundly in a warm bed for the first time in weeks, her mother sat by the guest room window, gazing at the city's illuminated skyline. Behind her, the rhythmic ticking of an antique clock punctuated the stillness. Emma's thoughts inevitably turned to one man, her father, Charles Reed, the one person who could have altered everything, but who chose instead to leave her in the dark. The following morning, over a breakfast served by a housekeeper who barely registered the presence of strangers, Emma finally articulated the question that had been gnawing at her since the previous night. "Tell me about him." Walter didn't require clarification. He gently placed his coffee cup down and settled back into the leather armchair, meticulously folding his hands. His eyes appeared weary, not from a lack of rest, but from the immense burden of memories he had carried for too long. "Charles was always the priority," he began. "The firstborn, the one proudly bearing the family name. Everyone said from the very beginning that he was destined for leadership. He was brilliant, ambitious, and adept with numbers. But he also possessed a sensitive nature. He interpreted every decision I made as a judgment." Emma listened intently, without interruption. "When your uncle, his younger brother, arrived, things shifted. Your uncle had a more gentle disposition. He was artistic, emotional, and required greater attention. I endeavoured to provide both of them with what they needed, but Charles believed I loved his brother more." Walter's voice tightened with remembered pain. "No matter how many times I assured him it wasn't true, he only heard the praise I bestowed upon his brother. And when your uncle perished in that accident, it shattered our entire family. Charles didn't grieve like the rest of us. He became bitter, cold." Emma watched her grandfather's eyes cloud over with a still, fresh sorrow, and then she materialized. "Diana!" He uttered the name without venom, merely with a weary resignation, like someone recounting a destructive storm that had passed but left ruin in its wake. "She worked for one of our main competitors, young, intelligent, and ruthlessly cunning in a way few men could anticipate. But Charles saw her as his equal. She understood his resentment. She nurtured it." Walter rose and slowly moved towards the fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back. "Diana convinced him that he had been cheated, that I was preparing someone else to take his place, that he was entitled to more, and he believed her." Emma could feel the tension mounting, like pressure building behind a dam. They conspired together. Initially, it was small infractions, questioning board decisions, subtly shifting accounts. Then came the documents. I had entrusted Charles with complete authority. He presented me with a stack of papers, claiming they were part of a company restructuring. I was exhausted. I didn't read them. I simply signed them. His voice grew softer, laced with regret. Within weeks, Diana circulated the rumour of my disappearance, alleging I had fallen from a private yacht, lost at sea. No body, no witnesses. The press ran with it. My name vanished from the company within a month. Emma's stomach churned. "And no one questioned it?" "Some did," Walter admitted, but Diana had meticulously planned everything. A fabricated witness, a falsified investigation report. She even planted emails implying I had intended to vanish. The board, fearing instability, confirmed Charles as interim CEO. Within a year, he made his position permanent. Walter returned to his seat, his eyes now dark with anguish. Then came the ultimate betrayal. He married her, and not long after, she was pregnant. Emma leaned forward. With Martin? Walter nodded. Charles named him after his brother, the one he thought I favoured more. He said he wanted to restore the name. And I suppose, in his mind, that child represented his redemption, his replacement legacy. Emma's fingers tightened around her mug. And he raised Martin as the heir? Yes, Walter confirmed, as the future of Reed Enterprises, as the son who would finally receive the praise Charles felt he'd been denied. But Martin, he isn't who they claim he is. Emma frowned, sensing a deeper narrative, but Walter offered no further explanation. I observed from a distance, he continued, built Sunbridge in the shadows, started anew. But I never ceased to wonder where I had gone wrong, how a son I cherished could transform into a man who would erase me so completely. His gaze softened as it landed on her. You asked why I didn't find you sooner. Perhaps a part of me feared that if I did, I would only bring more suffering into your life. Perhaps I believed you were better off not knowing how ugly it had all become. Emma felt the crushing weight of generations pressing upon her chest. Charles Reed wasn't merely a cruel father. He was the tragic outcome of unaddressed wounds, of misinterpreted love, of ambitions skillfully manipulated. This didn't excuse his actions, but it illuminated the storm that had shattered her family and reduced her own life to wreckage. And now she understood the profound implications. This transcended mere forgiveness. It was about reclaiming a name that had been stolen and deciding whether she would carry it forward or leave it buried with the man who had tried to obliterate it. Emma remained silent for a long while after Walter concluded his narrative. The fire crackled softly in the study, casting a warm glow across the oak-panelled walls, but the silence between them was starker than the biting winter wind outside. She sat curled in the armchair, her arms clasped around her knees like a small child, her eyes fixed on the flickering flames, yet her mind was lost in a distant past. I used to believe, she began quietly, that I must have done something terribly wrong to deserve all of it. Walter lifted his gaze from his seat across the room. Emma's voice remained calm, though each word felt as if it had been painstakingly dredged from the depths of her soul. My mother, she continued, she wasn't like the rest of the family. She wasn't boisterous or ruthlessly calculating. She was quiet, kind, perhaps a little fragile. I remember watching her fade, not from illness, not initially, but from disappointment. Each time Charles ignored her at a party, each time someone in the family dismissed her as just the wife, it chipped away at her. Walter lowered his gaze, already anticipating what was to come. After my uncle died, Emma continued, she barely spoke. She carried so much grief, hers, yours, Charles's, and no one seemed to notice. Or perhaps they did, and simply didn't care. She sank into a depression that utterly consumed her. I was 16 when she died. Emma paused to take a ragged breath. The memory tasted bitter in her throat. They claimed it was natural causes, but it wasn't. She died from being invisible, Walter whispered, his voice hoarse. I didn't realize it had become so dire. Emma slowly turned her head towards him, her eyes sharp with carefully restrained anger. No, you didn't want to know. The words hung between them, unforgiving and heavy. Walter didn't attempt to defend himself. He simply nodded. Emma exhaled, her voice growing softer once more. After she was gone, I thought perhaps Charles would cling tighter to what remained. But he didn't. I became a liability to his image. When I became pregnant at 25, he didn't even inquire about the father. He just looked at me as if I had dragged the Reed name through the mud. She gave a humorless laugh. He called me a disgrace, told me I had an hour to leave his house and never return, said I was no longer his daughter. Walter flinched but remained silent. Emma stared back into the fire. So I left with nothing but a duffel bag and a 6-week-old ultrasound. I stayed with a friend for a while, took on temp work, did freelance data entry during the day and waited tables at night. After Lily was born, I tried selling handmade crafts online. Some months we managed, some months we didn't. Her voice wavered for the first time. One night, Lily developed a fever. She was 3 years old. We were living in a shared basement apartment in Queens. The heating had gone out. I held her all night, wrapped in towels, and prayed the fever would break. When the sun rose and her eyes still hadn't opened, I panicked. Walter leaned forward, his hands trembling. "I wrote a letter," Emma whispered, "to you. I didn't know if you were even alive. I didn't even know where to send it, but I found an old address in a legal document from years ago. I begged for anything, a place to stay, a loan, a proper bed for Lily. I never heard back." She finally looked at him, her gaze piercing. "You received that letter, didn't you?" Walter hesitated before responding. His eyes welled up, making Emma momentarily believe he might deny it. But he didn't. Instead, he simply nodded. "I did," he rasped. "It arrived weeks after you sent it. I read it alone in a Tokyo hotel room. Every word is seared into my memory." "Then why didn't you come?" she pressed. Walter swallowed hard, visibly shaken. "Because I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" she snapped. "Of losing everything again," he admitted. "I had just meticulously rebuilt Sunbridge. The instant Diana or Charles discovered I was alive, they would have come for it. And at that point, I wasn't strong. I was still struggling to emerge from depression, after years of hiding, watching the company I founded being dismantled and warped into something unrecognizable. I was barely functioning. And when I saw your letter," his voice cracked, "I froze. I told myself I would help later, when I was safer, stronger, but later never arrived." Emma remained silent, her jaw tight and her eyes glistening. Walter rose and moved towards her. He didn't drop to his knees, nor did he plead. He simply rested a hand on the back of her chair. "I failed you," he confessed. "As a grandfather, as a man." Emma turned away, tears tracing paths down her cheeks. "You were the only family I had left." "I know, and you left me too," Walter said, lowering his head. Several minutes passed in silence, broken only by the crackling fire. Then, through clenched teeth and with a trembling voice, Emma spoke. "I'm not sure I can forgive you." "I wouldn't ask you to," Walter replied. "But I hope, in time, you'll allow me to try and set things right, and not just with words." Emma wiped her face with her sweater sleeve. Her chest ached, not only from the pain, but from the strange relief of finally articulating everything. She didn't offer absolution, but she didn't walk away either. For now, that was enough. The following morning, Emma awoke to the unfamiliar quiet of a home untouched by the anxieties of rent. The walls of Walter's townhouse seemed to absorb sound, rather than amplify it, as if the very structure had nothing left to assert. Lily was still deeply asleep, nestled in Egyptian cotton sheets that Emma had never imagined she'd encounter. For a moment she stood at the doorway, simply observing her daughter's rhythmic breathing, recalling countless nights spent checking for frost on Lily's lips, consumed by the fear of what winter might claim. By noon, Walter summoned her to his study. The conversation was brief but laden with significance. "I want you to work," he stated. "If you are to rebuild your life, I will not do it for you, but I will open the initial door." Emma didn't hesitate. "Where?" "Sunbridge Holdings. You will begin as a project assistant. No grand titles, no family names. You'll earn your position the same way I did." That same afternoon, Emma stepped into Sunbridge's towering glass lobby for the first time, not as Walter Reed's estranged granddaughter, but as an anonymous individual with a temporary badge and a well-worn briefcase. She wore a second-hand blazer, scuffed heels, and a resolve born not from aspiration, but from dire necessity. Her initial day felt like an overwhelming deluge. Everyone around her was younger, quicker, and more assertive. A woman in her 30s with a 6-year resume gap was, to them, either a recipient of charity or someone using illicit means to secure an opportunity. Whispers started almost immediately. She's his granddaughter, isn't she? Probably just here until she snags a board member. No way she makes it past the next quarter. Emma remained silent. She offered polite smiles, meticulously took notes at meetings she barely comprehended, and returned home each night with her mind reeling from unfamiliar acronyms. But instead of abandoning hope, she enrolled in free online courses in financial modeling and data analytics. She stayed awake after Lily was asleep, replaying the day's meeting transcripts, dissecting corporate jargon as if it were a foreign language lesson. She jotted notes on napkins, recorded questions in voice memos, and gradually began to connect previously disparate ideas. Within 2 months, she could articulate Sunbridge's entire API structure and project user growth trajectories by quarter. By the 4th month, her name started appearing in internal pitch decks. Her supervisor, a brash 27-year-old named Mason, remained unimpressed. "You're making progress," he told her once, "but this isn't a classroom. One misstep and you're out." That misstep occurred in the 5th month. Emma was entrusted with her first independent assignment, a modest merger involving a promising fintech startup from Austin. She had prepared the projections, organized the presentation, and managed communications with the startup's CEO. However, she overlooked one crucial, devastating detail: a mismatch in the customer base. Her team had constructed the proposal based on an assumed demographic of small business clients. In reality, the startup's success stemmed from niche freelance platforms. This misalignment immediately raised red flags during negotiations. The startup withdrew, and Sunbridge lost the deal. On paper, it represented a $20 million setback. But the true impact was far greater. Walter had invested months of effort and a substantial portion of the year's flexible capital in nurturing that deal. He hadn't informed Emma of the high stakes, not wanting to burden her with that pressure. Now, the failure jeopardized not only their reputation, but the company's entire growth forecast for the fiscal year. Emma spent that night sleepless, anticipating the call, the reprimand, the dismissal. It never came. Instead, Walter summoned her to his office the following morning. His voice held no anger, only quiet resolve. "I've reviewed your analysis," he said. "You missed the segmentation." "I know," Emma replied, her voice barely steady. "I'm sorry, I should have cross-referenced the usage reports." He observed her face. "You're not wrong, but you're not the first to make that mistake. And you won't be the last." Emma's eyes widened. "But the deal—" "I will salvage what I can," Walter interrupted. "I'm already in discussions with their investors. There may be an opportunity to restructure. But this isn't about the money. It's about what you do next." Emma sat there, stunned. "You're not removing me from the team." Walter leaned forward. "I've lost everything before, Emma. You learn more from one honest error than 100 safe triumphs. You made a mistake because you cared. You wanted to get it right. That matters." It was the first time anyone had ever addressed her this way in a professional context. Not with disdain, nor with condescension, but with belief. She left that room profoundly affected, not because she had been punished, but because she hadn't, because someone had witnessed her stumble and chosen not to crush her for it. What she didn't realize, what Walter would never reveal, was how perilously close the company had come to collapse. The startup deal had been a cornerstone of Sunbridge's Q3 expansion. Without it, a dozen other smaller projects would have been delayed or scrapped. But Walter, with the reputation of a phantom and the cunning of a survivor, secretly renegotiated terms, traded favors, and persuaded the startup to reconsider under a restructured licensing agreement. He never disclosed the immense difficulty of this task, unwilling to let fear motivate Emma. He wanted her to keep striving, not to repay him, but to prove something to herself. And so, she did. Emma's advancement at Sunbridge did not go unnoticed. Within months of her initial setback, She had helped secure 3 smaller contracts, revamped internal protocols for onboarding new clients, and even received an unexpected nod of approval from her once disparaging supervisor. For the first time in years, she approached her workplace with quiet confidence rather than apprehension. She was no longer merely enduring, she was actively earning her place. Yet, success frequently draws attention, and not always the favourable kind. Her first encounter with Martin occurred at a joint fintech panel hosted at a Midtown conference centre. Both Sunbridge and Reed Enterprises had been invited to present competing proposals for a government-funded cybersecurity initiative. Emma had not anticipated being seated at the main table, but Walter had insisted on her presence. "You'll gain more insight from one afternoon of competition than from a semester of theory," he remarked with a faint smile. She had heard of Martin previously. His name permeated the industry like a golden thread. Harvard-educated, charismatic, already a board member before 30. When he entered the room, heads turned. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a bespoke navy suit, his posture rigid with purpose. His eyes scanned the room, as if he held dominion over it. When they landed on Emma, his expression barely faltered. "You must be the girl they rescued from the street," he said, extending his hand with a condescending smile. Emma met his grip firmly. "And you must be the boy whose mirror convinces him he's already CEO." He chuckled, but a flicker of irritation glinted in his eyes. During the panel, Martin dominated the discourse. His pitch was polished, aggressive, and filled with high-tech jargon designed to impress rather than inform. Emma's team adopted a more human-centric approach, emphasizing accessible solutions and long-term adaptability. By the session's conclusion, the room was divided, but a few crucial investors whispered their interest in Sunbridge's modest yet grounded vision. Martin took notice. Afterward, in the hallway outside the auditorium, he approached her again. "Impressive display," he conceded. "I almost believed you wrote that presentation yourself." Emma raised an eyebrow. "I did." "Right," he retorted with a smirk. "I forget. You're Walter's latest project." He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping. "But everyone knows what this is. He's attempting to redeem his flawed lineage, to compensate for your father's blunders. It won't last. You don't belong here." Before she could formulate a response, he was already striding away, exchanging pleasantries with the senator's aide, as if he hadn't just spewed venom. Emma returned to the Sunbridge office with a fire ignited in her chest. That evening, sleep proved elusive, compelling her to venture into Walter's private study, a space she seldom entered. Driven by a vague sense of curiosity, she retrieved several folders from his family records shelf. Within their contents, nestled between tax documents and aged board meeting minutes, a peculiarity emerged: a second copy of Martin's birth certificate. Though not actively sought, its details felt incongruous. 2 certificates existed, one identifying Charles as the father, while the other left the corresponding field blank. Their disparate formatting and seemingly digitally altered signatures raised immediate red flags. The following day, still grappling with her perplexing discovery, she sought out Gerald, a retired legal advisor for Sunbridge, who had collaborated with Walter during the company's nascent years. Now in his 80s, Gerald remained remarkably incisive, residing in quiet retirement upstate. Over coffee, she presented the documents. His response was immediate and unequivocal. "Oh, this one's a fabrication," he declared, tapping the certificate that named Charles. "Walter had me discreetly investigate this years back. Martin isn't Charles's biological son. Diana was already pregnant when they married. Charles remained oblivious until much later, but by then he was inextricably committed. The demands of public image and board politics necessitated his decision to raise the boy as his own." Emma, astonished, queried, So Walter was aware too? Gerald affirmed. Naturally. That's why Martin was conspicuously absent from his estate plans. Walter considered it a blemish, though not the boy's fault. Still, Charles persistently positioned Martin as the future of Reed Enterprises. Emma departed, her mind reeling. Martin, the polished scion who often regarded her with disdain, was not a Reed by lineage. He possessed no biological claim to Walter's legacy, no inherent right to his current position. Yet he served as the public face of Reed Enterprises, the adversary she now confronted in a battle for lucrative contracts and reputation. And now, their paths were destined to intersect once more. The government contract, emerging from the panel's deliberations, had narrowed to two formidable contenders, Reed Enterprises and Sunbridge Holdings. Martin was poised to spearhead the upcoming negotiation rounds for his company, while Emma was designated to lead Sunbridge's response. For the first time, they would directly challenge each other, not merely through persuasive rhetoric, but with strategic acumen, persuasive influence, and the weight of their respective legacies hanging in the balance. When Emma informed Walter, he offered no commentary, simply presenting her with a substantial dossier of notes and a quiet imperative: make them listen. Emma exited his office, holding a profound truth in one hand and an unwritten future in the other. Her struggle now transcended her own standing. She was fighting to expose who genuinely belonged, and who, in fact, never did. Emma had always acknowledged she wasn't the most intellectually gifted individual in any given assembly, but she unequivocally knew no one would outwork her. As the stakes escalated, this particular distinction was poised to become profoundly significant. The initiative entrusted to her was essentially a salvage operation, an internal investment Sunbridge had made in a mid-sized European firm whose cybersecurity product had floundered due to paltry adoption rates and inconsistent user feedback. The board was on the verge of writing it off as a complete loss. Someone had quipped during Monday's meeting, "Simply sever ties and reallocate resources." Yet Emma, having meticulously reviewed the back-end analytics for days, sensed a discrepancy. The metrics conveyed a narrative divergent from the executive's perceptions. Although the user base was modest, engagement was remarkably high. The handful of clients utilizing the software were integrating it across multiple departments and even expanding its usage. Despite this, the conversion funnel was dysfunctional, not due to a flawed product, but rather a misdirected messaging and targeting strategy. The initial pursuit of the incorrect audience had been the fundamental misstep. Overnight, Emma crafted a new proposal. It meticulously outlined a comprehensive repositioning strategy, recalibrated the communication campaign, and advocated for a more streamlined rollout, focusing on mid-sized, regulation-heavy sectors like healthcare and legal firms, rather than sprawling technology corporations. Initially, her ideas met with resistance, but Walter, crucially, paid heed. He granted her 72 hours and a lean team to validate her hypothesis. They conducted a limited pilot program with 3 regional firms. By week's end, all 3 had transitioned to paid subscribers. Within a month, the software not only achieved profitability, but also generated over $15 million in new revenue, firmly re-establishing Sunbridge's position as a significant contender in the secure data services market. This was more than just a victory. It marked a pivotal turning point. Emma, once known as the girl Walter found under a bridge, was now lauded as the analyst who rescued the quarter. A few weeks subsequent to this triumph, Walter extended an invitation for her to represent him as a speaker at a global fintech summit in Chicago. Initially, she demurred, stating, "I'm not a keynote speaker. I lack the requisite pedigree." Walter's concise retort was, quote, "2, accompanied by Lily, who remained backstage with Walter's long-standing assistant. Quote, 2, Emma made the journey. Dressed in a muted charcoal suit and understated jewelry, she ascended the stage before an audience that, in times past, would likely have dismissed her. Instead, they listened intently. She unveiled a newly co-developed software prototype, an AI-driven financial security module engineered to pinpoint latent vulnerabilities within business infrastructures. The demonstration was sleek, highly practical, and grounded in authentic data. Emma's delivery was not that of a showman, but of someone who intimately understood the gravity of having everything at stake. Upon her conclusion, the room did not erupt in clamour. There was no need. The hushed, resolute applause conveyed precisely what she needed to discern. They now regarded her with seriousness. Yet, it was the subsequent events that proved truly transformative. During the summit's culminating press conference, a reporter inquired of Walter, who was seated beside her, whether he had selected a successor at Sunbridge. Walter's response was immediate and unequivocal. "My granddaughter, Emma," he declared, his voice carrying with sufficient clarity for every microphone in the room to capture. "She is not only the most resilient individual I have ever encountered, but she also represents the future of this company. This is not due to her name, but because she comprehends what it means to fall, and, crucially, how to rise again. The true heir to Sunbridge is more than just a strategist. She is someone who possesses a profound understanding of people. She is someone who discerns what others overlook. That, precisely, is the essence of leadership." Emma remained momentarily frozen, stunned. It was the first instance he had vocalized it publicly, devoid of hesitation, unmarred by calculated spin, simply unvarnished truth. Later that evening, after the reverberations of applause, the exchange of handshakes and the obligatory networking dinners had receded into the quiet solitude of her hotel room, Emma sat by the window, gazing at the Chicago skyline. Lily slept soundly in the adjacent bed, her gentle breathing a steady, peaceful rhythm. Walter's soft knock preceded his quiet entry. "I meant every word," he reiterated. Emma offered no immediate verbal reply. Instead, she nodded slowly. There was no need for a grandiose speech of forgiveness, no dramatic outpouring of tears, yet an internal shift had unmistakably occurred within her. She no longer viewed Walter solely as the man who had, at one point, failed her. She now perceived him as a man genuinely striving to rectify past wrongs, not through hollow apologies, but through decisive action. And for the first time since her childhood, Emma felt a burgeoning sense of belonging, a profound realization that perhaps, just perhaps, she was no longer alone. There was no need for spoken gratitude. The eloquent expression in her eyes conveyed everything. The week following the summit was marked by an unusual quietude, yet it was far from inactive. Behind the scenes, Emma and Walter meticulously orchestrated a silent storm. Every maneuver was carefully considered, every decision weighed twice before implementation. There was no rush. Their approach prioritized precision over speed. The process began with a solitary phone call to an independent law firm, one Walter had trusted since his earliest days in business, and, critically, one with no affiliations to either Reed Enterprises or Sunbridge, thus preempting any accusations of favoritism. Within hours, a private team of investigators commenced a thorough review of every document pertinent to the original transfer of Reed Enterprises contracts, including board meeting minutes, internal emails, and, most significantly, the paper trail surrounding Diana and Martin. Emma worked alongside them, poring over digital records until her vision blurred. The original asset transfer was riddled with too many inconsistencies to be mere coincidence. Dates failed to align, signatures varied. Diana's name appeared on financial transactions even before her official incorporation into Reed Enterprises. Most damningly, Martin's documentation had been repeatedly altered over the years, sometimes retroactively, sometimes with discernible sloppiness, always with the singular intention of fabricating legitimacy. "What precisely is your objective here?" the lead investigator inquired one evening, after Emma had furnished another batch of scanned bank statements. Emma's reply was unwavering. I seek the truth, nothing more. Not revenge, nor spectacle, just the truth, presented for all to see. Walter, listening nearby, offered a subtle nod, his eyes reflecting the profound weariness of a man who had waited too long to correct the record. They opted for a ceremonial approach. Rather than direct confrontation, they would orchestrate a celebration, a carefully constructed diversion veiled in glitter and accolades. Walter publicly announced, via a formal press release, his intention to host a private gala at the Astoria Grand Hotel in Manhattan, ostensibly to honor the future leadership of Sunbridge Holdings. The phrasing was deliberately ambiguous. No specific names were attached, no hint of impending drama, yet just sufficient to pique the curiosity of industry leaders, investors, the media, and crucially, the very individuals who most needed to hear the truth. The moment the press release circulated, Martin took notice. He was not oblivious. The timing felt distinctly off. Emma's recent successes, Walter's escalating public praise. Something was unequivocally shifting. Within a day, he arrived unannounced at the Sunbridge offices. "I simply came to offer congratulations," he stated casually, breezing past the reception desk and directly into the executive wing. Emma intercepted him at the glass wall near the elevator bank, arms formally crossed. Martin offered an overly expansive smile. "Grand gala, eh? Sounds rather important." Emma remained unflustered. "You'll see." His eyes narrowed slightly. "You should exercise caution, Emma. You're new to all this. Sometimes, when people delve into the past, they unearth things that ultimately bury them." Emma took a step closer, her voice soft but resolute. "The past often holds the key to unlock the future's freedom." Martin departed without uttering another word. That evening, Diana telephoned him from their luxurious penthouse apartment. Her voice, typically composed, now carried a distinct tremor of panic. "You must uncover their motives. I'm receiving calls, inquiries about old documents and records. Someone is scrutinizing us too closely." Martin assured her he would address the situation, yet he was powerless to halt the unfolding events. Emma and Walter had meticulously solidified their strategy, and the incriminating evidence was no longer confined to a single vault or email server. It had been cross-referenced, meticulously notarized, and formally archived with legal witnesses. Diana's instincts proved accurate. The veneer of their carefully constructed facade was rapidly disintegrating. Walter, for his part, maintained his composure. His instructions to the legal team were straightforward: no extravagant accusations. Let the facts speak for themselves. Let them bear the burden of explanation. The night preceding the grand gala, Emma stood on the hotel's rooftop terrace, her gaze sweeping across the breathtaking Manhattan skyline. Lily slept soundly upstairs, under the vigilant guard of Walter's most trusted aide. The city lights shimmered beneath her like an intricate tapestry of unfulfilled aspirations. Walter joined her in quiet contemplation, his hands clasped behind his back. "This isn't about me," Emma murmured softly. "I seek no vengeance." He nodded in understanding. "I know. I merely wish for them to cease their pretense of having built something they actively stole. I want the truth to be revealed." Walter looked at her, a faint flicker of pride illuminating his eyes. "Then tomorrow, you will deliver it to them." She turned to face him. "Regardless of what transpires next, thank you for your unwavering belief in me." He offered a gentle smile. "My belief in you transcends our familial bond. I believe in you because you have unequivocally earned it." As they descended from the rooftop, the ballroom below was undergoing a spectacular transformation. Crystal chandeliers gleamed, and meticulously polished name cards were aligned on gold-rimmed tables. Exquisite floral arrangements framed a stage where, before long, the past and future were destined for a dramatic collision. Down the street, cloaked in the darkness of a waiting car, Martin observed the lobby from a distance. For the first time, he found himself utterly uncertain as to which side of the unfolding narrative he would ultimately align with. Meanwhile, in their penthouse, Diana sat in solitude, her phone silent in her hand, her eyes fixed upon a framed photograph of her wedding day, pondering just how much longer her deception could endure. The ballroom of the Atoria Grand radiated a soft, golden luminescence as nearly 300 distinguished guests settled into their seats. Industry luminaries, astute tech investors, influential media outlets, esteemed board members and pivotal partners filled the expansive hall. A string quartet played a delicate melody in the background, while attentive servers gracefully navigated between tables, offering flutes of champagne and exchanging hushed updates about the latest arrivals. Everyone present understood that this was far more than a mere gala. An undeniable undercurrent of anticipation simmered beneath the polished veneer, and Walter Reed was renowned for never squandering an audience. At the forefront of the ballroom, a stage had been erected with a minimalist backdrop featuring the silver emblem of Sunbridge Holdings elegantly suspended above a lone microphone. The invitation had promised a grand celebration of legacy and leadership. However, beyond Emma, no one truly knew who would be honoured that evening. Standing backstage, her palms felt cold despite the warmth of the stage lights. Her heart, however, pounded not from fear, but from an unyielding sense of resolve. She wore a dark green gown, modest yet commanding, and clutched a small remote control in her hand. The initial slide for the projector was loaded. The files had been rigorously vetted, triple-checked and meticulously time-stamped. Absolutely nothing tonight would be left open to interpretation. Walter approached her from the side, impeccably dressed in a tailored black suit. "Are you prepared?" he asked gently. Emma turned to him. "For the first time in my life," she affirmed. He smiled, pressed a tender kiss to her forehead, and then stepped back. "Then let them understand who you truly are." As she stepped onto the stage, a profound silence descended upon the room. Cameras clicked incessantly. Phones were raised, capturing every moment. Some guests murmured in recognition, others in surprise. Emma surveyed the assembled crowd. Her voice, when it came, was remarkably clear. "Even 2 decades ago, I believed my family's legacy had reached its natural conclusion. My grandfather, Walter Reed, was presumed deceased. My father, Charles Reed, informed me that I had irrevocably disgraced our name. I was cast out, alone, homeless. I gave birth to my daughter under the roof of a stranger. I worked minimum-wage jobs. I pleaded for assistance, and I received none." The projector behind her illuminated. A brief video montage commenced. Emma walking with Lily along the picturesque East River, the makeshift cardboard tent beneath the Brooklyn Bridge, and finally, Lily joyfully chasing butterflies in Walter's exquisite Manhattan estate garden. "I am not recounting this for your pity," Emma declared. "I am sharing this because the individuals in this room need to grasp the profound cost of silence and the invaluable worth of truth." She clicked the remote once more. The first image appeared. 2 scanned birth certificates, one pristine, the other digitally altered. Martin Reed is not the biological son of Charles Reed. He is not the grandson of Walter Reed. This truth was concealed to preserve a public image. Murmurs rippled through the captivated crowd. Cameras zoomed in, capturing the pivotal moment. Another click. The next slide. Shell company name, bank transfers, foreign accounts. Over the past 15 years, Diana and Charles Reed engineered a complex network of shell corporations to launder funds illicitly siphoned from Reed Enterprises. The irrefutable evidence is presented here, thoroughly verified by independent investigators, complete with transaction logs, detailed recipient trails, and offshore beneficiaries. Another click. A final document materialized, an ancient board agreement bearing Walter's original signature, now revealed to be a forgery. This contract was fraudulently utilized to illegally transfer Reed Enterprises from its rightful founder, Walter Reed, under false pretenses. It was buttressed by an elaborate false death certificate, meticulously orchestrated and sealed through a web of bribery and misinformation. I present all these documents today not to ignite scandal, but to rectify a profound injustice. At the far end of the ballroom, Diana stood motionless, her wine glass trembling visibly. Beside her, Martin's face had drained of all colour. He abruptly pushed back his chair, jostling a passing server, and stormed towards the hallway, cameras flashing and capturing his hasty retreat. Emma paused. Her gaze swept across the room until it finally settled on her father. Charles sat utterly motionless, his expression inscrutable, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. For the first time, he made no attempt to interject. He remained silent. He offered no defense. Walter rose from his seat and calmly stepped onto the stage. He stood alongside Emma and took the microphone. For 2 decades I have maintained my silence, observing my legacy twisted and stolen, he stated calmly. But no longer. Tonight I declare unequivocally that there is only one rightful heir to all that I have painstakingly built. One individual who embodies the true values of this family with unwavering integrity and courage. He turned to Emma. My granddaughter, Emma Reed. The applause began tentatively at first. Then it swelled, echoing throughout the grand hall, resolute and persistent. Cameras meticulously documented every single moment. The board chair of Sunbridge Holdings rose and made a formal announcement. In light of the irrefutable evidence presented, and with Walter Reed's complete endorsement, we officially confirm Emma Reed as the next CEO and undisputable heir to Sunbridge Holdings. Before Diana could even utter a protest, 2 legal representatives quietly approached her table. One handed her a formal letter, immediate removal from all board positions, pending a comprehensive investigation. She attempted to speak, but her voice cracked and was instantly swallowed by the symphony of 100 whispers and the relentless flashing of cameras. Emma stepped forward again, this time without the remote control. Thank you for your attention, she said, her voice firm yet composed. I did not come here to destroy. I came here to rebuild, with truth, with accountability, and with the fervent hope that no one else will ever endure what I have, simply to prove their rightful place. She stepped down from the stage and walked towards Lily, who had been discreetly brought in for this climactic moment. The little girl reached up and clasped her mother's hand. Together, they walked through the applauding crowd, not as victims, nor even as mere survivors, but as something far greater, as the true and undeniable heirs of the Reed name. The days following the gala unfolded with dispassionate precision. The carefully constructed silence that had once shielded Charles, Diana, and Martin shattered into a cacophony of headlines, subpoenas, and formal investigations. There was no longer any plausible narrative to spin, no revised version of the story that could be crafted to safeguard their tarnished reputations. The unvarnished truth had already taken deep root in the public consciousness. Within 48 hours, the board of directors at Reed Enterprises convened an emergency session. The media, having caught wind of the development, gathered a throng of journalists outside the gleaming glass tower in Midtown Manhattan as suited executives filed into the boardroom. Inside, behind polished mahogany doors, the mood was somber but resolute. The evidence presented at the gala was irrefutable. Legal advisors confirmed its absolute authenticity. Stakeholders, fearing the imminent erosion of brand value, unequivocally understood that inaction was no longer a viable option. The vote to remove Charles Reed as CEO passed with an overwhelming majority, 9 votes to 1. The sole abstention came from a board member who had previously been a close friend of Charles's, but even he offered no defense. Charles did not attend the meeting. He sat alone in his penthouse office, observing the city lights through the one-way glass. He had not spoken a single word since the night of the gala. Diana, now under federal custody, was being rigorously questioned about the intricate chain of laundering transactions irrevocably tied to Reed Enterprises' subsidiaries. Her lawyers frantically scrambled, citing insufficient oversight and plausible deniability. However, too many official records bore her distinctive name. Too many illicit funds had flowed through accounts directly under her control. Her subsequent arrest made national news. As for Martin, his downfall came in a profound silence. Yet it was no less devastating. He had applied for dual citizenship in the EU, intending to expand his burgeoning consulting career, but the ongoing investigation exposed the shocking falsification of his birth records. His status as Charles's son was now legally void. Without valid documentation, his application was summarily denied. Worse still, his past employment at Reed Enterprises was under intense review, and major firms immediately distanced themselves from him. He effectively vanished from the public eye. The arrogant, disdainful man who had once dismissed Emma as an elderly man's sentimental project faded into obscurity, a cautionary tale whispered among headhunters and corporate executives. Yet, through it all, Emma remained composed. She did not gloat, nor did she make any media appearances beyond a single declaration issued via Sunbridge. "I never wished to harm anyone. My sole desire was to unveil the truth. When justice is served, it should aim not for vengeance, but for restoration." These powerful words resonated throughout the business world, printed in the Wall Street Journal, quoted across major financial blogs, and lauded as a testament to grace under pressure. Walter, observing the quiet dignity with which Emma carried herself, convened a private board meeting at Sunbridge. Before the assembled leadership team, he formally transferred 65% of his shares to Emma, granting her decisive voting control of the enterprise. "You revitalized this family's reputation," he confided to her later, "and you achieved it not with bitterness, but with foresight. Sunbridge will flourish under your guidance." Emma accepted the shares, not with fanfare, but with a silent pledge to safeguard what she had painstakingly acquired. She understood, better than anyone, the agony of losing everything and the immense effort required to rebuild. A week later, the media frenzy began to subside. Lawyers continued their work, and official statements were released. But for Emma, the intense scrutiny diminished, a reprieve for which she was profoundly grateful. On a tranquil Sunday afternoon, she clasped Lily's small hand and drove them out of the city. They journeyed upstate to a modest cemetery nestled amidst rolling fields. The weather was cool, the air still. Emma carried fresh flowers, while Lily clutched a drawing she had made, an image of her Emma, and a man with white hair and a gentle smile. They walked unhurriedly between the gravestones until they reached the designated plot. Emma knelt beside the headstone and placed the bouquet. "Hi, Mom," she murmured softly. "I wanted you to know we're doing fine. More than fine, actually." She glanced down at Lily, who stood quietly, her expression uncommonly serious for a 6-year-old. "This is for you, Grandma," Lily whispered, carefully placing her drawing beside the flowers. Emma took a deep breath. "I'm sorry it took so long to get here. I wish you could have met her. You would have adored her laughter." She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the tranquil wind carry the silence. Not grief, not anger, but a profound sense of peace enveloped her. She reflected on all the previous versions of herself: the shattered daughter, the desperate mother, the woman huddled under a bridge with her child and a cardboard makeshift roof. And now she was entirely different. Not because she had inherited power, but because she had reclaimed her identity, her voice, and her rightful place. Walter waited by the car as they returned. He remained silent, offering only a respectful nod when Emma met his gaze. She had completed her journey on her own terms, and she had returned not to bury the past, but to honour it. The nascent breath of spring carried the faint aroma of cherry blossoms as hundreds gathered beneath the white canopy tents erected in Riverside Park. The Hudson River sparkled under the afternoon sun, and banners displaying the name Lily's Bridge Foundation swayed gently in the breeze. It marked a beautiful day for new beginnings, and for many, a powerful symbol of redemption. The foundation's purpose was unequivocally clear: to provide housing, education, and vocational training for homeless mothers and their children. Emma had poured her heart and soul into the project, investing not only her financial resources, but also her poignant memories of nights under bridges, of hunger masked by bedtime stories, and of hope intertwined with fear. Lily's Bridge was not merely a charity, it was the lifeline Emma had once desperately wished for. Among the guests were community leaders, social workers, generous donors, and even several city officials. Emma stood near the podium in an elegantly tailored navy dress, with Lily by her side, dressed in white and blue. The stage itself was simple, adorned with a single photograph of Emma and Lily from years past, a picture taken just days after Walter had discovered them. The symbolism was stark. From the streets to this very moment, their arduous journey had not been erased, but reclaimed. However, just as Emma stepped forward to deliver her speech, a murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone held up a phone, then another. A reporter approached her staff with an unexpected inquiry. "Miss Reed, would you care to comment on your father's op-ed in the National Business Ledger this morning?" Emma's brow furrowed. She hadn't read it. Not yet. An assistant promptly handed her a printed copy. She scanned it quickly. The headline struck her like a physical blow. "How I Inspired My Daughter's Mission, A Father's Role in Resilience." The byline read, "Charles Reed." The article was polished, subtle, and insidiously manipulative. Charles meticulously portrayed himself as a stern but loving father, asserting that his prolonged silence had been a harsh but necessary form of love, intended to instill resilience in Emma. He wrote about their supposed reconciliation after her ascension at Sunbridge, artfully positioning himself as the unacknowledged force behind her strength. Emma's hands trembled almost imperceptibly as she folded the page. She ascended to the podium, her smile gone, yet her gaze unwavering. The crowd immediately fell silent. She adjusted the microphone. Her voice, when it came, was cool and measured. "Before I discuss this foundation, I must address something I very much did not anticipate confronting again, a narrative crafted and published this morning under the name of someone I once called father." She held up the page, then set it aside. "I want to be absolutely clear. Lily's Bridge is not a product of inherited inspiration. It is not born from a legacy, nor from the wisdom of a parent. It was born under a bridge, as I cradled my child through a storm, uncertain if we would survive the night." Silence. Even the photographers froze mid-capture. "I did not build this in memory of my father. I built this in spite of him." She paused, allowing her words to sink in. Then, she reached into her coat pocket and retrieved a folded, yellowed envelope. "This is the letter I sent him 7 years ago," she stated, holding it aloft. "I was living in a shelter. My daughter had pneumonia. I had exhausted every resource, every favor, every shred of pride. And I asked him for help, for recognition, for the smallest gesture of care." She unfolded the letter. "I received no reply, no call, no message, just silence." She placed the letter on the podium, then looked directly into the cameras, which were now intensely focused on her. So, to anyone who reads that op-ed and wonders if perhaps there was another side, there wasn't. There was only abandonment, and the quiet strength that emerged from having no one else left to believe in but yourself. Applause did not erupt immediately. Instead, there was a profound stillness, the kind of silence that follows a raw and irrefutable confession. But then it began. A slow, steady round of applause from the back of the room. Then another, until the entire gathering rose to their feet, clapping not just in support, but in recognition of an undeniable truth. By sunset, Charles Reed's name was trending, but for all the wrong reasons. Numerous news outlets published headlines discrediting his op-ed. Former employees began coming forward, recounting his cruelty, his obsessive control, and his complete absence from any philanthropic endeavors. A popular podcast meticulously dissected the timeline, contrasting Emma's public records with his article, branding it as historical revisionism at its ugliest. Social media showed no mercy. One viral post displayed an image of Emma holding up the old letter captioned, "She didn't just build a bridge, she burned the lies that tried to walk over her." Charles attempted to issue a follow-up statement, but it was largely ignored. No one cared anymore. His last tenuous grip on his legacy had slipped through his fingers, brought down not by a scandal, but by a single, undeniable truth. The daughter he abandoned had triumphed without him. Emma, standing by the river with Lily, didn't smile as she watched the sunset. She felt no sense of triumph. She felt closure, and sometimes that was far more potent than any revenge. A week after the truth had reverberated through the city and reputations had shattered like fragile glass, Walter Reed quietly vanished from the headlines. There were no farewell interviews, no press conferences. He had achieved what he returned to do. He had reclaimed his legacy, set things right, and now he let go. He entrusted Sunbridge Holdings to his granddaughter Emma without fanfare, only a handwritten note tucked into her office drawer. "You didn't just survive, you rebuilt what I lost with more heart than I ever had. Sunbridge is yours now." He retreated to a secluded farmhouse in upstate New York, surrounded by towering pines and profound silence. No press, no security detail, just the serene morning sun and an old man finally liberated from the cacophony of a world that had once tried to obliterate him. Meanwhile, Emma fully embraced the life she had fought so fiercely to earn, not as someone's daughter or granddaughter, nor even merely as a survivor, but as a woman who had transformed broken beginnings into bridges for others. Under her astute leadership, Sunbridge didn't merely expand, it underwent a profound metamorphosis. She re-envisioned the company's direction, pivoting towards social fintech, developing micro-lending platforms for low-income families, creating digital tools to impart financial literacy to single mothers, and crafting apps that offered budgeting resources for the homeless. Yet, her heart, as always, belonged to the project that bore her daughter's name. The Lily's Bridge Foundation experienced rapid growth. What began as a single shelter program now boasted hubs across the entire state, providing housing, daycare, food assistance, and employment resources to women who, like Emma, had once desperately needed not pity, but a tangible path forward. They forged partnerships with schools, trained dedicated volunteers, and constructed transitional apartments adjacent to local libraries and clinics. And through it all, Emma never missed a crucial planning session, a vital field visit, or a precious bedtime story with Lily. One crisp morning, as spring's first subtle blossoms began to stretch across the urban skyline, Emma arrived early at her office. Her assistant placed a single envelope on her desk. It was handwritten, bearing no return address. Inside, a straightforward message on plain stationery conveyed a powerful narrative. "My name is Helen. My daughter and I resided in our vehicle for 4 months. We were bereft of alternatives until someone at the shelter directed us to Lily's Bridge. Today, my daughter awoke in a warm bed. She drank milk, engaged with books, and inquired when she could resume school. I have just secured a job interview. We now possess a future, thanks to you." Emma remained motionless for a prolonged period. Her fingers delicately traced the paper, as if it held profound significance. Tears did not fall, nor did a smile grace her lips. She simply absorbed the hushed importance of the message, allowing its weight to settle within her. Later that afternoon, Emma collected Lily from school and altered their usual route home. There were no phones, no meetings, no formal addresses. They went to Riverside Park as the sun began its descent behind the city buildings. The Hudson River gleamed with the day's diminishing golden light, tranquil and expansive, like an unfulfilled promise. Lily surged ahead, her hair swept by the wind, her effervescent laughter carried above the rustling leaves. She clutched a star-shaped kite, decorated with markers and glitter, featuring the familiar 3 stick figures she always drew: her, Emma, and Walter. Emma stood silently at the river's edge. Her gaze followed the expanse of water, the bridge, the distant horizon. She contemplated her mother, the girl she once was, of dwellings constructed from cardboard and unsealed letters, of Charles, of pervasive silence, of engulfing storms. And then her thoughts shifted to the present. A soft voice gently drew her back. "Mom," Lily pointed towards the river, "do you think the bridge can transport us anywhere?" Emma offered a tender smile, kneeling to meet her daughter's gaze. "It already has," she affirmed. "We just hadn't realized it yet." As they stood there together, Emma experienced a sensation she hadn't encountered in years. It was not triumph nor relief, but a profound and quiet peace. For the first time, the burden of mere survival had lifted. Instead, she bore the purpose of healing. Ultimately, that was the only form of justice worth pursuing. Her thoughts coalesced into unspoken words, which would nonetheless reverberate through every bridge she helped construct, every life she helped elevate, and every night she tucked her daughter into a secure bed beneath a proper roof, free from fear. Justice is not retribution. Justice is restorative healing. If this narrative resonated with you even half as much as it did with us, then perhaps it is because, deep down, we all grasp the fundamental struggle to carve out our place in this world. Emma's journey transcended mere vengeance or the reclamation of a legacy. It was about interrupting a detrimental cycle, about constructing something superior from the wreckage of betrayal, about demonstrating that true dignity stems not from lineage or affluence, but from the choices one makes when faced with disbelief. If you believe such stories merit being told, tales of resilience, justice, and the quiet potency of healing, then we urge you to subscribe to our channel, for more voices like Emma's await their turn. Now, we pose a question to you. Have you ever been compelled to rebuild something after experiencing a profound break? Whether it was a relationship, a career, or even your intrinsic sense of self, share your story in the comments below. We diligently read each one, because sometimes vocalizing your truth is the inaugural step toward healing.